Today on Co-op for Two, Adventures by Gaslight, the rare and out-of-print 1986 expansion for Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. What makes this game so special? Why has it never been reprinted? And is it worth hunting down? Stay tuned to find out. Okay, let's start with some preliminaries. This will be a completely spoiler-free review. You can watch 45 plus hours of live stream playthrough of this entire game on our YouTube channel. And the last session of that has a long, detailed, spoiler-filled review of the game. If you've already played it, that might be something you want to check out. And the first session has a complete unboxing of this rare game that you might want to check out as well. And lastly, if you stay tuned till the end of this video, I'll talk a little bit about a 45-page PDF patch that we made after playing the game to try to smooth out some of the edges and improve the ending. All right, so let's put Adventures by Gaslight into context. The base game that this is an expansion for is Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, which was released in 1981 by Sleuth Publications and written by Gary Grady and Suzanne Goldberg, a married couple. This requires that you have the base game or one of the reprints from it. You can see I've got the map here of the original 1981 game, second edition or so. You need that, and you need the directory that comes with one of the prints of this game. This is again from the 84, 82 version, but you can use the recent ones as well. Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective has been reprinted several times, and the most recent set of boxes are by Space Cowboy, and they're very polished with high production and beautiful maps. This was the third big expansion for the game that came out in the 80s. There was the Queen's Park Affair and the Mansion Murders. And then there was an expansion after Adventures by Gaslight, which was West End Adventures. Now, all three of those, the first two, Queen's Park Affair, Mansion Murders, and the one after Adventures by Gaslight, West End Adventures, all ended up getting reprinted by Space Cowboys in different boxes. Queen's Park and Mansion's Murders got reprinted in the Carlton House box, and West End Adventures got reprinted in the Jack the Ripper box. And Adventures by Gaslight snuck through and hasn't been reprinted. And there's no sign that it will be. It's a little bit of a mystery. So why might that be? Well, one reason might be that unlike the other expansions, some of which are continuing long epic cases, and some are piecemeal boxes, were written by Gary Grady, Suzanne Goldberg, and friends, whereas Adventures by Gaslight were written by a French couple, Jacques and Nadine Thiriet, and then translated from French into English, translated very well, I might add, and was originally called the Fair of the Paper Birds. So that's one reason it might have not be reprinted. Apparently they've lost the original documents for these. This may not have been probably on a word processor, but whatever. It's hard to translate now. That may be one reason. Another reason is possibly that this game has a reputation of being the most notorious of the Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective expansions. It's extremely long, extremely difficult, exhausting to play, and has an ending that's somewhat less than satisfying, and we'll go into that. This one and Queen's Park and maybe Mansion Murders were all released as contests, by the way, where the answers to the game were not in the original box, and they had a contest, and you would submit your answers, and then they released them later. So, despite not being reprinted, it does come up regularly on eBay for about $100, $150, somewhere in the $75, $150 range. And we'll talk about whether this is worth your money at the end. So from my standpoint, this is the quintessential Sherlock Holmes consulting detective experience. It feels like a Sherlock Holmes consulting detective case, but much longer and much more mentally demanding. You should probably expect between 12 and 30 hours of gameplay. There are 3 reviews on the Board Game Geek forum section for this game. They're all worth reading. They're short, but everyone agrees that it's exhausting. It's super long. You should expect to play 14, 15. I double those times, so I would say 20, 30 hours. And you should expect to play it in a short sequence, games close together. Otherwise, you will forget stuff. It's not uniquely long. Queen's Park Affair is also a very long, big campaign game, but has a slightly better reputation, and you can get the new version of that in one of the reprints. Despite its length and size, it's actually surprisingly narrowly focused on a single burglary that happens on a single night with a small cast of characters. The game is broken up into 2 basic acts. The game pretends that it's happening over the course of 5 days, but it's basically 2 in-game days, 2 acts. The first one is in London. That'll be the bulk of your time. And that plays like the standard Sherlock Holmes consulting detective games. You play on the normal map of London. You use the normal directory. You've got a newspaper. You've got your casebook that introduces the case, and then you've got the clue book, which if you're only used to the new reprints, something that will surprise you is you've got a list of all of the clue points that are available. In the reprints, most of the cases, you can't see what clue points are available. You have to say, I want to go to 5 Northwest. You turn to that page. And if it's there, you read it. And if it's not, well, there was nothing there. So it's very hard to tell when you've seen everything. Okay, that's London, the first act. Standard Sherlock Holmes consulting detective. Act 2 of the game takes place in Paris. You travel to Paris. And there's a new map for Paris. Here it is. You can see it's a smaller map. Some of the locations are numbered according to this legend, and these are all in French. You'll have to spend some time trying to figure out what some of these French buildings mean. But not all of the places you go are on this map. Sometimes you'll read something in a newspaper or in one clue that says, here's a shop at 55 Rue de whatever. And you'd look up Rue de whatever you'd look up that address, 25, and you look up the 25 in the list of clues, and if it's there, then you can read it, even though it's not on the map anywhere. And there's no more directory. And that change of mechanic does switch things up a little bit. It feels different. It feels a little bit like you're lost walking around a foreign city, and a little harder to get a spatial picture of things. You can't, in normal Sherlock Holmes, you'd say, well, if this happened here, I can look at the buildings around it. Just by looking at the map, looking at the numbers around it, I can go to those. You can't do that here because just because something's on the map doesn't mean it's not in the book. So Paris feels different. It's a change of pace. It's also quite a substantial change of tone. The first half in London kind of feels like a treasure hunt. You're just going everywhere. It's giant. You're traveling all over London, talking to everyone you know, all of your normal informants, as in normal Sherlock Holmes, and all of these places. And then you get to Paris, and there's no more informants that you're familiar with. and you're sort of doing a little origin story rather than this broad study of the whole place. Okay, why do we love Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective? What is the main draw of the game? Well, for me, it's the writing. And this has everything that you would love about the writing of Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective series. It is of the highest quality, emotionally engaging, subtle, humorous, historical. You'll learn lots of stuff. You'll learn stuff about Paris, about London, about people. It really does feel like you're reading a Victorian novel. And the dialogue is of the highest quality. You're interacting with people that feel real, that talk differently depending on their station and their experience. It's just everything that makes this game so charming in its base form is here, but in a much more immersive, lengthy, sort of fully embracing the idea of Sherlock Holmes. There's small, short, just breezy text that's just for fun. And then this game has some of the densest clues, scene description, 2-page clues that we had to read through a dozen or more times looking for, mining it for information. There's also some busy work where there'll be some places, some person you want to track down, you'll have to go through 5 or 6 hops to find them and actually talk to them. And in some sense, it's busy work, but in the other sense, it's just richly immersive. And that's one of those things that this expansion has taken the time to do. So rather than just, you want to talk to this person, go here, sometimes you have to track them down. And it's just the extra flavor and immersive feeling of actually doing that legwork. The other part for me that makes these games so enjoyable is the feeling of traveling back in time and space to a different place and a different time. And again, what I would say to you here is this takes everything that you love about that experience from the base game and just sort of ramps it up to 11. Here, especially when you travel to Paris. So you travel to Paris during the World's Fair, the 1889 Paris Expedition World's Fair. And there was a session that we played. And one of the things we did in the session, not to give anything away spoiler, is we went up to the Eiffel Tower to look around, and we went down to the floor of the expedition, which was a huge real thing. I mean, this is part of what makes Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective so enjoyable in general, is you're reading about and interacting with real historical facts on the ground, so to speak. And this game is special in that you're actually going to a very momentous real-world event, the Paris World's Fair, Paris Expedition in 1889, which while we were playing, we were looking at some of the Wikipedia entries. I mean, there are many books written about this World's Fair and tons of photos and film of it. And it's a very impressive thing. And there's a scene where you're interacting with Thomas Edison's demonstration of the phonograph, and it's described fully with lots of details. And when we finished this game and we stopped playing, I went and I was just sitting drinking a cup of coffee and thinking, feeling like I had just been to the Eiffel Tower, looked out over Paris, and I had just seen this amazing demonstration of the phonograph. That's how real it felt being immersed in this world, that I felt that had just happened for real, that I had really seen this first phonograph. So, I mean, that's why I play this game. And if you like this game for that kind of stuff, this is this really has that in spades. Okay, I talked about the difference between the Act 1 and Act 2, and I think this game manages to pull that feeling of pacing off very well. In addition to the 2 acts, there are a couple of other things that happen, a couple pieces of evidence. You get this postcard at some point, and you get a document and a cipher, and there are a couple of things that happen in the game that when it gets resolved, you feel like, oh, I've now advanced one step towards this story. It provides an arc, a very satisfying arc. There is because there are so few characters that you're interacting with a lot of people, but it's just this one little burglary that happens in this one house, this small cast of characters that you learn more and more about, and you sort of unravel their stories over time. And it does make you feel like there's a progression, a real story and an arc with twists. And during the game, between these sessions, we would flip-flop on who we thought was the villainous person. Like, is this person innocent? And then we got very suspicious of them and then changed our mind. And that's one of the more enjoyable parts about like a mystery, a movie, when you think you know who the villain is and then you were wrong, but you're not sure. So very satisfying about that. Okay, so as far as the story, well, let's not say story. As far as the challenge of the mystery, the sort of experience of trying to solve the mystery, I would say this is one of the most compelling and engaging Sherlock Holmes consulting detective challenges. That's not to say it's the most satisfying and impressive and clever story when you read the end, but as far as presenting this challenge to you that you're going to wrestle with, I found it one of the most compelling. And again, I've said this before, but this focus on this small little group of people in this small little scene that you just really have this deep dive into and really focus on is quite an experience. Lots of little details that work. There's good use of the newspapers. There's some very dense, compelling pieces of evidence and clues. Some of them you really have to study and spend a long time sort of piecing apart and making sense of, and that work very well. There's a key cipher that is very difficult, and lots of people have played this and given up on it. If you stay to the end and we talk about the improvement we've released, the patch document, that may help address some of that. And there are a couple of handwriting clues that are realistically hard to make sense of, maybe, but were frustrating and don't get resolved very well, and we'll talk about that a little bit. All right. So that's the sort of challenge that you're presented with. Now let's talk about the nature of the puzzle solving, of the deduction that you will be asked to do. This is not a case where you're going to get to the end and have definitive proof of that you know what happened. You're not gonna get to the end and feel like, I've put all the pieces together, I know what the answer is. As you do with a bunch of these kinds of games and some Sherlock Holmes cases. Instead, it's going to be a case where you're spending 5 or 6 hours struggling to find simply a possible, plausible, consistent theory of the case. Now that is a shocking situation, and it was a baffling position to be in, to be struggling. We exchanged maybe 100 emails, and I lost sleep tossing and turning, not trying to figure out what proved that this is how it happened, but simply trying to come up with one plausible, candidate, consistent theory. Now, that's either going to sound amazing and compelling and like a wonderful experience for you, or that's going to sound frustrating. You will get out of this game what you put into it, but you're going to have to work hard to come up with even just a consistent theory. So what makes it, if it's notoriously hard, what makes it hard? And I think this is worth spending a couple moments talking about. It's not hard to locate clues the way some of the new reprints are, where you have to work very hard to figure out what is the clue I haven't stumbled upon, because you can't see the list of clues. Here you've got the complete list of clues, so you can keep track and know when you've seen everything there is to see. And you should see everything there is to see. And that's what I consider the hardest part of some of the new reprinted scenarios. And unlike quite a few of the mystery games that I've played on the channel, it's not difficult because you're overwhelmed with facts and overwhelmed with a sort of swarm of people whose names you can't put together and remember, differentiate, and details that you won't have written down or can't remember. It's not that. And it's not that it's difficult because you have to hunt for these tiny little needles in haystacks that are easy to overlook. And if you just found that one little needle in a haystack, it would all make sense. Instead, it is incredibly challenging because it's got a few basic facts that are incredibly hard to reconcile. Observations, behaviors, story elements that feel like it's on the tip of your tongue that you should be able to explain why this happened, but you can't. And that is a wonderful experience. I spent, as I said, sleepless nights. I went on long walks talking over things. How can it be that this is true and this is true? Things like that. And it almost gave me a feeling of the Crack the Case game that I've talked about, which are these simple, tiny little mysteries on a card that you try to figure out by answering yes or no questions. And it's frequent in that game that you say, this can't be. You've given me 3 simple facts, and I cannot think of how that could possibly, how they could all be true. And that's the feel of this game. And it's a wonderful experience to find yourself in, to be struggling to try to make sense of simple facts. You're not along for the ride in this game. You will really have to work hard to figure it out. And you will have to think out of the box. And you will not be sure that you're right when you get to the end. I guess another thing I should say, I've got it on my notes here, is that you will have to live with quite a bit of uncertainty. So if you're the kind of person that feels frustrated that you're going to have to make these leaps of logic and that there are going to be parts of the mystery that never get explained to you, not even when you read the solution, if that frustrates you, then this game is going to frustrate you. But you are going to have to live with not understanding certain things and reading a solution that doesn't explain them. Okay, so that's a good way to say concisely, if you play these games for the enjoyment of reading this very elegant solution that all of a sudden puts everything together, and when you look back, it makes sense out of everything completely, and it's completely believable, but you just missed it, you're not going to get that here. The quality of the ending, as is not infrequent with these kinds of games, doesn't quite match the quality of the game. It's brief. It doesn't explain a whole bunch of stuff. It feels a little cheaty. It feels a little like, well, that those things are coincidences, or it's not plausible, or someone's behavior is not plausible. Like, it's not going to leave you completely satisfied. That's for sure. And it's not emotionally satisfying, and it doesn't wrap up the story in a nice way. And there's lots of stuff that's never explained to you. So if you're here for the end experience, this is not the right game. This is the game for the people who like the immersive thematic trip that they're going to take while playing this game, and the challenge of buy into the idea that there's a solution and don't worry too much about what Sherlock Holmes' solution is. And you may feel like when you get to the end that the game maybe overstayed its welcome, was a little longer than it had to be. Now, with all those criticisms of the end, I still think it's absolutely worth it for that. And I don't play it for the end, so that's okay with me. But having said all that, we were so engrossed in this game, and we spent so much time talking about theories and what would be an explanation for whatever, that when we finished the game, we decided to write to make a patch, a PDF file with some extra stuff. And I've got an older version of that printed out here just to give you some idea. It's about 45 pages long. It's got a new map in it. Not a replacement Paris map, but an additional Paris map. It's got a whole section of hints, and it's got a new ending and then a new epilogue and new questions. So despite being 45 pages, it's meant to be very non-invasive, so you just print this out and there's a couple extra clues and you use the replacement questions and the replacement answers and read the replacement solution. And then if before you want to answer it, you want to check out some of these hints, there's a huge collection of hints framed as dialogues between different characters, and you can pick and choose. You can say, well, this thing really hung me up. I really don't want to answer this. I really don't understand this at all. You might go talk to this person and get a little bit of a hint on how to solve the cipher, etc. So just to make it a little softer ending instead of a hard fail. So if there are places where you really get stuck, you can read some of the hints. And hopefully the new solution makes a little more sense to you, and hopefully the epilogue provides a little more emotional closure. Now, if you do decide to play the game, you should go on the BGG forums and see what people say about this patch, whether they agree that it's an improvement or not. There are only a handful of people on the planet who have played this game, so you might be the first one to actually use this, but let us know what you think. Okay. Final thoughts. No one should start playing Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective with this expansion. That would be insane. You should start with the base game, the Thames murders, and cut your teeth on some of the standalone shorter games, which still could take you several hours. There seems to be a fairly strong consensus that of these super long epic expansions, Queen's Park may be one of the best. So probably start there, and that's been reprinted. There's a little bit of debate whether the original version was better than the new reprint, but you can get a hold of that reprint with additional cases for $40-50 in the Space Cowboys, Carlton House, and Queen's Park box. So if you really want a big epic experience, you should start after you're familiar with the base game. Start there. Save Adventures by Gaslight possibly for last. If you're a glutton for that exhaustive marathon experience, then start with Queen's Park and then move to Adventures by Gaslight. If, though, you love this idea, you love the idea of being tested for your stamina and your concentration and your dedication and note-taking, and you really love that fully all-in immersive experience, this has been, for me, one of the most unforgettable board game experiences for me, and probably my favorite Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective experience, despite the flaws of the ending and all that. Just the amount of mental engagement in trying to come up with theories has been the best of all the Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective experiences. Though I do love Dave Neal's Baker Street Irregulars boxes, those standalone games. But for me, the more epic, the longer, the better. So I love that. I frequently point out that for this kind of a game, I play it solo on the channel, but I played it this time with two other people, Aaron and Jonathan Warner, who joined me in the chat channel. And I think more than most games, this really, really benefits from having another set of eyes and someone else to bounce theories back and forth with. I would really strongly recommend that you find a way to play this with another person rather than playing it solo. You absolutely can play it solo, but I think this is a game you'll want to talk to someone about and bounce ideas off of. And you may be able to find someone online to play it with if you can't find someone in real life. Take notes is the other piece of advice I would give you. The man does not solve the case, the notes solve the case. That's my belief. So that's the other piece of advice. If you read the patch kit that's on the BGG forum, there's also a bunch of tips for playing the game that I would recommend. And if you do play this and you do enjoy it, you might check out, if you like this kind of epic marathon, you might check out Gumshoe, which was the 1985-1986 game that Sleuth Publications made that's set in the 30s, a hard-boiled detective of the 30s, sort of a film noir. And again, after you play it, you can watch the spoiler-filled review at the end of the 7th session of the live stream playthroughs. And I would love to hear, especially if you use our patch kit, but I would love to hear from you if you play the game and talk about it. The reviews on BGG are all like 10 years old, so I'd love to talk about the game from someone who it's fresh in your mind, and it's, again, especially if you use our patch kit. And hey, this is a special experience, a special game, a special experience. You travel back to the 1800s, but you're also traveling back to the 80s, sort of a game design that feels different than the games that are out there now. And I hope you enjoy it.